Thanks, listeners, for joining us for Elko Live today here on KELK as we're sitting down for our monthly update from local law enforcement. Chief Ty Trouten in as we're updating our local law enforcement news. Of course, let's start with the response to the derailment yesterday. You were among the first people that I talked to, and police started getting the calls right at the time of the derailment, just before 5 a.m.
Yeah, indeed. It initially started when it was dispatched as being much worse than it was because we were told it was the Amtrak train. That number of cars derailing would have been a much greater burden and difficulty to deal with here in this community, just because we don't have hundreds of ambulances and such and so forth. But we were fortunate there. It was a cargo train. The cargo was inert. It was feed corn. So really got quite lucky on that. The one big concern we had, of course, was that there were cars that struck the columns supporting the bridge and came to rest against those columns. We were fortunate not having injuries. We wanted to make sure we didn't have injuries. Somebody go over the bridge and then it collapse or anything like that. I will say, and this is kind of a positive for the Union Pacific, I was amazed that within 12 hours, they were able to get cars moved. We were able to have the bridge inspected. Senator Gokachia asked, and we were able to get an NDOT inspector up here. We do have a local one, but I think probably a higher quality one came from Carson City, and once the cars were moved, was able to inspect those columns. We were able to get that road opened up, and then even by 11 o'clock last night, they had one of the rail lines open, which is good. They're still continuing cutting up cars, removing cars, hauling off the cargo and so forth, but we were very fortunate in that. I think a lot of people were familiar with Palestine, Ohio, and the issues there with hazmat spills. It can be quite serious if you have to start evacuating. If it happened where it did and it was hazardous, we'd had to evacuate a large portion of the town. I know it did create a lot of frustration and people being angry and you name it because of the delays. And does beg one of the questions that always comes back up about we need another route into Spring Creek, and people are absolutely correct. What most people I think are incorrect on and don't understand, however, is that's not a city function. It's not really even within the realm of the city and the county. Just did a little rough math here, playing around with things. Just to build a bridge, one lane either direction, simple bridge, the cost of that would be about $2,500 for every man, woman, and child within the city of Elko, just to build the bridge. That doesn't speak to any of the permits, acquiring the land, the appraisals, any of that stuff. That's just to construct the bridge. So for all those people who are the keyboard crusaders and wanting to offer their 2 cents worth, please feel free to submit your donations down to the city. Bear in mind, I don't think the children can pay for themselves, so parents, you'll have to step up there. Obviously, too, there's a lot of people in our community can't pay for that, so feel free to double that or triple that will help. When you start talking about now the road construction, acquiring the land, we won't even get into eminent domain issues and everything. You're going to have to turn around, and everybody in the county, not just the city residents, but everybody now is going to have to submit another check of that value just so we can start constructions on the road. Now, I'm sure most people aren't sitting on 10 to 20,000. They're just wanting to donate to local government. This is why it's critical that we are partnered with the state on this. So we know the keyboard crusaders are very good at typing. So I would ask them, put your money where your mouth is. And instead of your money, start sending your letters. Get them to our state representatives. Get them to NDOT and demand. We have a community of roughly 20,000 people with a single road to it. I can't think of anywhere else in the state that's like that. I appreciate the work that NDOT does on things, beautification projects and so forth, but we have a critical need for infrastructure. The city, the county, various people have screamed this for years. We have not got traction. So I give it out to the public. These folks that are outraged, everybody who was upset yesterday and thinks that this is just unacceptable, they're right, but do something about it that actually will matter.
Chief Ty Trouten, our city police chief. And Ty, there's a good example in that locally, Elko County distributed a survey that had to do with, and I believe it might have even been an NDOT road survey about priorities and needs. It's on the county website. I'm not sure if they're still taking comments, but it's easy to go on there and comment, just as I did, and said, yes, that is a priority. And that was long before this recent accident, but having a secondary access to, between Elko and Spring Creek. Now, the last time that Lamoille Highway had attention, if I'm not mistaken, in any significant way, was taking it from a 2 to a 4-lane highway. And that was when Barbara Ikonovich, the late Congresswoman, was in Congress. So that's how long ago it was that we had funding and the attention that this area needs. And it does take a concerted effort, Chief. It takes our local governments working together as a region, maybe even involving other rural regions. I think it's been mentioned that, Lander County seems pretty successful in getting some federal or state highway dollars directed toward their interchanges.
Yeah, as a person who commutes regularly to Spring Creek, would love to see that second route. We always have the concerns. And there was people calling in yesterday, what happens if? Well, it did happen. I mean, we have several accidents, again, people not paying attention or being looky-loos or distracted. You have to run someone to the hospital and traffic is jammed like that. It's not good. But overall, I guess my point would be is, it's not the city's responsibility to provide roads to another community outside the jurisdiction anymore. It is to, let's create another route to Wells or Carlin. That's not how it works. It has to be done in collaboration, but we really need to prevail upon the state powers that be to give us that attention.
And maybe, again, working together is, when we get federal money, such as ARPA dollars, steering those resources toward things like this infrastructure. And I know we're going to talk briefly, too, about the bridge scenario. We're still not, I guess we're confident enough that the 12th Street Bridge was reopened, Chief Trouten, but we know that it's aging infrastructure and it does have to be maintained. So there'll be some more evaluation of that bridge.
Yeah, indeed. And I draw back. I grew up in Montana, a small community, and seeing a bridge like that, probably newer than the 12th Street Bridge, that was taken out in a train derailment. It took 2.5 years to replace that bridge, just one section of it.
Can you imagine the quality of life?
Our biggest fear yesterday was that we wouldn't be able to reopen this bridge, and this becomes a daily facet of our lives because we just don't have the infrastructure to handle the growth we've seen in this community over the years. Again, to me, this should be a state priority number one. We'll see if others, will support that, and if we can get the state to agree to that.
And before we move on, I think you mentioned maybe accidents or injuries. There were none as a result of the derailment, Chief, but did I hear correctly? Did people suffer some accident or injury and have to go to the hospital during the 12 hours?
So during the afternoon, I think a lot of people thought they would beat the rush hour by leaving early and created a new time rush hour. And yes, we had cars, several cars, 4 in one instance, just rear-end one another, and one person injured had to go. It kind of pairs into another topic I want to talk about today, but it is an issue. It's difficult for us to get there. It's difficult to get ambulances there. People, in I guess my observations, seem to be so self-interested in getting to where they want to go. Nothing else matters. You see it on a daily occurrence where people just try to get right through that intersection and stay hanging out there. Never mind, now you're blocking traffic in another direction. You got one more car length ahead. It doesn't save them any time. They're not moving either, but that's difficult. One of the things that really bothered me yesterday, people coming down thought they would cut down Southside Drive and hit South 9th and Wilson and make a shortcut, and they're speeding. We have kids going to school. And, really, I guess that plays into another topic. We can broach that now. Recent movement, this Justice for Gabriel. As law enforcement, we 100% concur. This is a terrible tragedy. We feel bad. The loss of a child is always devastating. It's devastating for us, and we're not family. We're not, related. But I see a lot of the comments coming out and some of the statements being made, and I really wanted to discuss today. Simply put, I think we have a lot of uneducated people who want to tell everybody how it's done or what it should be, but they really have no comprehension. And in many cases, I feel they're very much hypocritical. As I said, we had these people yesterday just going to work or wherever. They're perfectly fine speeding down these roads. What would have happened if a child had ran out in front of them? But yet they'll sit there and comment and want to, judge someone else on this. Talk about this as a terrible tragedy and this claim that there needs to be justice. So I guess I would start with advising the public. Understand, law enforcement are not there to execute justice. Certainly, maybe it would be efficient if we could, but our government, our rights, are based upon us simply enforcing the laws. And it is not about justice. We would remind people we enforce laws. We do not get to create the laws. Those are your legislators. Those are signed by your governor. That is not under our purview. One of the other things, people think that we make the charges, that we do the charging. That is not correct. That is prosecutors. We can make seizures. People would know them as arrests. But that's based upon probable cause. And so I don't want to speak about this case specifically. It is being reviewed by the DA, so I don't want to jeopardize that in any way. But I just wanted to read a few laws and acquaint people because, like I said, a lot of people, they think they understand the law, but I doubt they could even find the site to research the laws themselves in many cases. One of the first ones, hit and run or leaving the scene of an accident. I wish we all had superhuman reflexes. That would be wonderful, and that cars performed like they do in Hollywood where they stop on a dime. That is not reality. And the law basically requires that a person has to stop their vehicle at the scene of the crash or as close thereto as possible and shall henceforth return to it in every event, remain on the scene of the crash until the driver has fulfilled the requirements of reporting the accident. That's for any type of accident. People just thinking that, well, if you don't immediately stop, you've committed a crime. That's not accurate. One of the next ones. This one I want people to pay attention to because it is violated. Thank goodness we have some alert drivers, especially lunchtime around 11th and Idaho. There are times when you can overtake vehicles going in the same direction, but there's times you cannot. If, for instance, vehicles are turning left in a left turn lane, you can proceed by them. There is no requirement that you stop just because there's a vehicle turning left. Obviously, if they're waiting for oncoming traffic to pass, they may be there for a bit. However, if there's multiple lanes in one direction and one car is stopped, that does require you to stop and ascertain at a crosswalk if someone is crossing. Talk about another thing. This is why, and this happens a lot, we see children especially, but also adults who wish to ride their bike on the sidewalk, and then they ride across a crosswalk. That is illegal. Just as it's illegal for a pedestrian to suddenly leave a curb or other place and walk or run into the path of a vehicle, which is so close that it's impossible for the driver to yield. We all have our limitations as humans in how fast we react to situations. There's no superhuman thing. Wish it was. You can't just run out in front of a car or suddenly appear and then blame the driver. That is why that law is there. It is a protection for drivers and an admonishment to pedestrians. Another one. Some of the assertions that have been made, I want to be clear on this one. This refers to abuse or neglect or endangerment of a child. This requires a person who willfully causes a child who is less than 18 to suffer unjustifiable physical pain or mental suffering as a result of abuse or neglect, or to be placed in a situation where the child may suffer that same physical pain or mental suffering as the result of abuse or neglect. Simply making a mistake as a parent or guardian does not rise to the level of neglect. It has to have a willful, intentional act with the idea that this is what you're causing that harm to the child. Again, lots of folks who wish to pontificate, I think, on what they want and what they feel should be justice, but that does not relate to laws. The last part, and kind of tied into that, would be to permit or allow that neglect or responsibility to occur. Well, again, if you don't have the willful act, it's not on the parent to, be guilty of allowing that person to do that, I guess. So there has to be that willful intent, not just a failure or a human weakness, a frailty, a mistake. going back to this whole thing being a tragedy, there were several things that could have prevented this. That does not mean that there are necessarily crimes that were committed. Now, again, the district attorney is reviewing the case, and by saying that there's not a crime, that does not diminish the amount of tragedy it is. This is horrible. I can tell you the instances in my career where I've had children die, seen dead children, everything from accidents to intentional. Those things are horrendous, just on our level. How much more so for the parents and people who care about that child and know that child. But would just caution people before you go, espousing what you believe should be justice or what it should look like. I would almost call a lot of these folks hypocrites. Again, we just have stop and go traffic yesterday, and we have a 4-car pileup. We had accidents almost from the get-go when traffic started coming into town yesterday. It's a car, it's a child, a pedestrian, a bicyclist. People commit accidents all the time because they're not paying attention, and a lot of these people who are screaming for justice and so forth, I know some of them. I know what they have done and their actions, and when they were in those throes, they weren't about justice then. They were wanting mercy, trying to find, understanding. So I do see it somewhat hypocritical for a lot of these folks, and it makes me a little bit question the reasoning behind it. Sadly, there's nothing to bring Gabriel back. I wish there was something that could. But unfortunately, this is where we're at. Now, everything I've spoken to about today is criminal. I'm not getting into the civil realm. That is not a realm I'm well versed in. I guess maybe that's a matter for other discussion. But on the criminal side, there's been claims that we didn't do it because of the race of people involved or different things. That has no bearing on us. And I'm here to tell you that I don't even know the race of the victim in this case. I've heard a claim, but that doesn't match what I know. That doesn't matter to us. I'm here to tell you, seeing a mangled child, you don't consider color of skin or anything else. It has to do upon the acts committed by people and whether they satisfy the elements of crimes.
Chief Ty Trouten is our city police chief, and listeners who may not be consumers of social media, he's responding to this very public social media campaign in which parents and or guardians of a little 4-year-old boy lost his life, tragically struck in a crosswalk on Mountain City Highway a month or so ago, Chief, and we know that he was on life support for several days. Was it nightfall on Mountain City Highway when that happened?
It was nightfall, and again, I don't want to discuss the specifics of the case, but there's recently been upgrades to that crosswalk to put in lights to alert drivers at night. One of the common misconceptions I think people have is that if they're wearing light colors or something, they're more visible. Really, unless a person is wearing reflective or high visibility colors, it is hard to see things at night. White can be just a shadow as much as black is. There's a reason why there's lights there. The other concern was we had a lot of folks who just could not be bothered to walk up to the crosswalk in that area. They wanted to cross wherever, and again, when you're driving down the road, most people aren't expecting a pedestrian just to pop out of anywhere.
So they weren't in the crosswalk? They were nearby?
In this case, they were in the crosswalk.
Okay. But the lights were not activated from what we understood, or is there a question about that?
There is no question about that.
The lights were not activated?
The lights were not activated.
Okay. So, and I do want to backtrack a bit. Poor Gabriel, who was 4, died on December 27th, 2023. So basically, just to give some of the details of what this social media campaign entails, that it says in a public post, this is according to this group supporting this campaign called Justice for Gabe. They're saying the driver who took his life, meaning Gabe's, walked away with no consequences of his action. And Elko PD is doing nothing to bring justice for Gabe because they're worried about the future of the driver. Help us spread his story. Help us get justice for this sweet baby boy. So a couple of things. As you just described all the laws, everyone in the community can agree that as tragic as this is a tragedy. But is it a crime? That is something for the district attorney to decide. And as you mentioned, Tyler Ingram is reviewing the case. The child did die in a crosswalk, but there are other extenuating facts and circumstances that were considered. Was the driver under the influence?
No indication of that. And again, when you look at drivers, say vehicular manslaughter, if there's an act or omission that leads directly to that death, that would be a crime. If there is not, there are such things as accidents. There are such things where people can have contributory acts. In this case, I don't want to get into specifics of the case, but there are contributory acts from other parties and directly related to this, but they do not meet the elements of making a crime. And honestly, I don't know the driver. I don't know the babysitter. I don't know any of these folks personally. What it is about is, did they or did they not commit a crime? And when they say that Elko PD is not trying to pursue justice, that is correct. We are trying to enforce the laws. Justice, maybe you could argue that a judge or a jury has some play in that, but we're about enforcing the laws. I'm certainly not going to go arrest somebody just because I think what they did was wrong or I feel it was wrong. I don't write the laws. I don't get to do that.
And you don't charge, as you said.
I don't charge.
Reports are submitted for review. District Attorney's Office can order additional investigation, can bring in independent investigation. There can be grand juries. There are several different methods to further investigate. So the chief is simply responding to the police actions in this. And this grieving family, it seems as though with every outward appearance and all the social media drama that's going on around this, and they had a candlelight vigil, attracted a huge crowd, that the grieving family understandably is looking for someone to blame. There was also a post that, if you read that post, it looks as though the babysitter is to blame for this terrible, tragic consequence.
So I think this is what bothers me about this group. They want a pound of flesh from someone, and the community wants a pound of flesh. If someone broke a law, they should be held accountable. If there's no law broken, what would a pound of flesh accomplish? Is that going to make them feel better? And again, I'm speaking on the criminal side. There can be a civil side. But the point in time, and this is what, again, I don't know that people ever consider. The babysitter, the driver, what are they going through? It just presumes that they nonchalantly walk off and, oh, no big deal, fine. We often face the same thing, oh, cops just shoot somebody, no big deal. We recently had to undergo that event as well, and I'm here to tell you there is trauma associated there. There's no good that comes out of this. This is not something that you just brush off and walk aside. However, we have laws for a reason to make sure that they are fair and consistently applied.
Well, Chief, and I think before we wrap up this part of the discussion, not that it's not an important community discussion to have, it's not something we would normally do, except that this group has decided to make this very vocal. It's been a very one-sided discussion. I understand that among the social media hosts, they've been excluding people from commenting who do have factual information, people who want to correct the record, who want to bring this down to a simmer rather than boiling over as it has. And so we want to go on the record on this radio show and give the police chief a chance to talk about the realities of this campaign. This group has also taken it upon themselves to identify the driver. And this was an 18-year-old man, I understand?
Correct.
They have identified this driver. They have put his photograph, his picture on social media. They've taken that upon themselves. So what that could entail, and I'm going to read directly from Black's Law Dictionary, the definition of harassment. Harassment, it is used in a variety of legal contexts to describe words, gestures, and actions which tend to annoy, alarm, and abuse verbally another person. A person commits a petty misdemeanor if with purpose to harass another, he makes a telephone call without purpose of legitimate communication, or 2, insults, taunts, or challenges another in a manner likely to provoke violent or disorderly response, or makes repeated communications anonymously or at extremely inconvenient hours, or in offensively coarse language, or subjects another to offensive touching, engaging in another course of alarming conduct, serving no legitimate purpose of the actor. And this may well be a dated definition, but certainly it does apply to things that people say and provoke on social media. You're responsible for that speech. And if someone harms that 18-year-old driver, if he loses his job, if there is any consequence as a result of what they've posted, that group, those people are responsible.
Absolutely. And with the advent of social media, there have been cases now where people harass, bully, harangue, pick your adjective, someone so badly that they harm themselves. And the people doing that can be held accountable.
And it's not a misdemeanor anymore.
No, not at all, both criminally and civilly. So, again, I don't want to get into religious things, but, whoever has, is without sin, pick up the stone. I know a lot of these people involved. There shouldn't be anybody grabbing any rocks at present. I would hope that this community, that the Elko Police Department has shown themselves to be professional and dedicated to protecting people, to doing what is right in the right way at the right time for the right reasons. I would hope that the community has faith in Tyler Ingram, our prosecutor. He has done a phenomenal job.
And he protects children. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, Chief, thank you again. It is a terrible tragedy. It was a tragedy, and the community grieves and mourns, and people are looking for, answers sometimes. It creates, this just terrible sadness. It was a terrible tragedy that a 4-year-old child darted out in traffic in a crosswalk that was not lit. The crosswalk lights were not activated. The 4-year-old was not holding the hand of the babysitter. It was a terrible, tragic accident. But is it a crime? That is not for a social media group to decide. That is for our elected official, our district attorney, Tyler Ingram. We'll follow up on that, obviously, as needed. That will give people some of the information that they need when they're considering making public posts.
I surely hope so. And I did want to bounce back to one of the things, too. I wanted to cover this when we were talking about the derailment. We made several phone calls, not just to media and other sources, but putting out posts, trying to alert people and let them know of what is going on. We've had a couple programs over the years. One of them was Nixle, to alert people of, hey, there's road closures or parades, different things. Both the Elko Police Department, the Elko Sheriff's Office, we have what is called the law enforcement app. So for Elko County Sheriff's app or Elko Police app, it's a free app. People can go into their app store, download it on their phone. We push out the notices to the public on those things, and including updates. So that is a great way to learn of things. There's several other very useful features, but that is a good one to have, just so you know when, hey, I'm coming to work, maybe I should cut through Halleck and avoid Lamoille Highway today, or different things like that. It's difficult in this day and age. A lot of people don't listen to local radio. We don't have a local TV station. The news we do get is out of Reno, not out of Salt Lake. The newspaper, they're usually lagging behind because they have to create an edition. Even sometimes putting it up on the digital side, it's not immediate. We are trying to reach our public, and we do utilize social media, Facebook and so forth, but really, people always complain about transparency. We have a free app for you to download and be able to interact and see, and we really need people to download that app and do that. If people just take a deep breath and bad things happen sometimes. This could have been so much worse. We're thankful that it wasn't. We had a lot of help from NHP, the Sheriff's Office even backstopping us on calls, because here's the other thing, folks. Write this down. Something bad happens like the derailment. It's not like sports where there's a timeout and the criminals sit on the sidelines waiting for us to come back into the game. Everything continues. We still have domestics. We still have traffic accidents. We still have thefts and, shoplifting. Everything is still going on. There's not enough of us here. There's not, 20 officers waiting for something to happen. I wish. We're certainly not there.
Thanks, Chief. I know we'll catch up again in a few weeks. And in the meantime, we want to mention Polar Plunge, which is March 16th, Elko City Park. Register at 10:30 for an 11 o'clock plunge. It's a special Olympics benefit, so it's a great way to show how much we care in this community.
Absolutely. And I want to highlight, because it's not where it usually is. Normally it's at the outside pool. That pool is not operational, so it's just going to be there in kind of that little cul-de-sac where we have National Night Out. So folks, get out there, get your teams put together, get your costumes and stuff. And we had to do this a few years ago. I think it's the same plan. We're going to have kind of the inflatable slide into the pool of water with ice cubes and so forth. So come on out.
All right. It's a great fundraiser and a great way to show support for the Special Olympics athletes in our community. Thanks again, Chief Trouten, our guest here on Elko Live today on KELK.